Joining us now is Republican Senator of South Dakota, John Thune. Senator, it's nice to have you here.
Good morning, Poppy. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well. We watched the hearing live on our show yesterday morning, as obviously you and so many Americans did. You know, Gina Haspel could have said, as Senator McCain points out, yes, torture is immoral. She did not, despite repeated questions to that effect. Would you have been more comfortable supporting her, because we understand you're a yes vote for her, if she had said, yes, it is immoral?
Well, I think she did say that, Poppy, that going forward, that's not something that she would ever, as the head of the CIA,
right, but she
allow to happen in the future.
She hesitated to call it, despite being asked directly, immoral, that it was point blank immoral.
Right. Well, and I think that I'm not sure that that particular question or her answer to that question is what the focus needs to be on here. I think that, you know, everybody's raising this issue of what she knew, when she knew it, and how involved she was in destruction of these tapes and all that, but that's all been investigated. I mean, there was a special counsel that looked into that, there was an internal investigation that looked into that, and I think right now the focus ought to be on her qualifications for this job, which are completely, I mean, there isn't anybody who questions her capabilities, including many past CIA directors from both Republican and Democrat administrations. So she's gotten wonderful reviews for her 30-some years that she's been involved in working for the CIA in a lot of different functions and roles. And I think that you know, the American people expect that when the president puts somebody forward who is qualified for the job, that the Senate ought to confirm him.
Do you think torture is immoral?
Do I think torture is immoral? I'm uncomfortable with torture in any form, and I think the discussion that was occurring at the time, and I think coming in, you know, in the House part of the time, but when I got to the Senate, there was a fairly spirited discussion about that. It was in the wake of 9/11. It was a very different time than what we're in right now. But that being said, I don't think there's any circumstance under which torture should be used.
Let's talk about North Korea and the wonderful sight we saw in the middle of the night, and that is those 3 Americans returning home to their families thanks to the work of the Trump administration and other parties as well. Here's what the president said, and I'm going to read it to you. He said, "We want to thank Kim Jong-un, who really was excellent to these 3 incredible people." Would you have said that?
No, but you know, I'd probably say a lot of things differently than the president does. But look, I mean, the issue here is that these detainees are home. You have to give credit to the president and to Mike Pompeo for negotiating that. And on whether you like his tactics or not, I think you have to agree that they are on this level working. Now we'll see what ultimately happens as a result of these discussions that we're going to have on with North Korea on denuclearization. But this is a great story, and I think you know, the president needs to be given the credit that he's due.
It's a wonderful development for these families and for these detainees, no doubt. And Secretary Pompeo to come home with him like he did after that 90-minute meeting is remarkable. What attitude do you think the president needs to take going into this meeting with Kim Jong-un? Do you think saying, you know, you treated these detainees who you had in captivity for a year, some cases 2 or 3 years, that you treated them excellently, is that the right approach heading into this meeting?
No, I mean, I think that you want to head into the meeting with clear eyes about who you're dealing with. I mean, this is a dictatorial regime, and my view is it's always trust but verify. I think they have to show hard evidence, and we have to have disclosure and verification mechanisms in place to ensure that whatever might be agreed upon actually is something that they'll follow through on, because we have plenty of experience in history by which to measure the veracity of this the regime there. And so I think that whatever our negotiators, as they get there, and the president, when he has these meetings, perhaps ultimately agree to, it needs to be with a clear-eyed focus on ensuring that there is compliance with that agreement, because I don't think you can trust these people.
Turning the corner to Senator John McCain's book that is coming out in just a few days, we're getting some more excerpts of it. And one of them is his explanation of why he gave the Steele dossier to James Comey, then head of the FBI. Here's what he writes. "I did what duty demanded I do. I discharged that obligation, and I would do it again. Anyone who doesn't like it can go to hell." The senator's words. Would you have done what Senator McCain did? Would you have handed over that dossier to the head of the FBI?
You know, it's hard for me to say. I mean, it's a hypothetical question. I think that the Senator McCain, for whom I have the greatest respect, is a true patriot, and I'm sure he did what he thought was in the best interest of the country, and obviously at the time handing it off to the chief law enforcement official in this country who would be responsible for dealing with it in an appropriate way, I'm sure in his view seemed like the right thing to do. So I think, I don't doubt that, and you know, what I would have done, it's hard to say, but I think that that's part of the history now, that's part of the narrative. And I think going forward, we need to focus on trying to get the facts, get conclusions, get this Mueller investigation eventually concluded, and let's find out where we are.
I will say, I did detect a smile on your face when we read back to you when John McCain said anyone who didn't like what he did can go to hell. I think we'd all like to hear more of that from John McCain. If we could. You know, again, you said you don't know what you do because it's a hypothetical, but you know what John McCain did. Did he do the right thing? Well,
I mean, I think that, again, I don't know everything about what he saw or what he knew, but I think that I always believe John McCain is an incredible patriot and somebody who served this country with just distinction and honor. And what he did at the time, I believe, was what he thought was right for the country. And and the colorful language in which he describes it is something we've all experienced firsthand and on a personal level. But he's very forthright. He says what he thinks, and in this case, I have no doubt that what he did was what he thought was in the best interest of this country.
We heard the Vice President, Mike Pence, say just a few hours ago, the Mueller investigation needs to, quote, wrap up, his words. And you've said, look, this thing needs to wrap up in so many words. Now we know a lot more. We know that 6 months ago, Bob Mueller's team was talking to big corporations like AT&T, like Novartis, about payments made to Michael Cohen to influence, or at least get insights, at the very least, into President Trump. Knowing what we know now that we didn't know 48 hours ago is part of Mueller's investigation. Do you still think it needs to wrap up immediately?
Well, I don't say immediately, Poppy, but I do think there needs to be sort of a pathway here to bringing some conclusion to this. You know, there are lots of things that they've already looked at, indictments that have been issued, and I think there are ultimately going to be people who are going to pay a price for wrongdoing in all this, some of whom have already been indicted. But I do think at some point, you know, the American people expect, and I think we all expect too, that this can't drag on forever. And, you know, there's a lot of information, bits and pieces of which come out on a regular basis. But the special counsel is looking at the full spectrum, I think, of these issues, and we trust him to conclude it and complete it. But I hope that it's completed in a timely way, that this isn't one of those things where it becomes just an unending process, because I think the American people are going to grow very weary of that, and they do want the president to get on with the important work of the country.